Welcome back to the Empire Builders podcast. Dave Young here with Steven Semple. And today, man, today's the day, man. We're going to rap about Birkenstocks. It's the crunchy granola shoe from the 70s. That's what I think of with Birkenstocks, and I want to like Birkenstocks. I tried them on many times in my life, and I don't know that I could get through the learning curve or whatever it is. They just didn't. Anyway, I'm anxious to hear the story because I think we're headed to Europe.
So the average, people who own Birkenstocks on average own 4 pair.
I get it.
In 2023, Birkenstock went public.
Oh, did they?
At a $7 billion valuation.
Dang. Why?
Right?
Why would they need to?
A lot of times I think when things like this happen, it's to free up money for the family.
Yeah, they're cashing out.
It's the give ability for key employees to have ownership. Like often there's a lot of reasons for doing an IPO. And in future, we're going to do one on Jacuzzi where it'll really highlight that really well because it's a crazy story.
Well, take me back to the beginning of Birkenstock, man.
Yeah. The model that Birkenstock is really known for is like that classic one with the strap and whatnot. And it's called the Arizona. And it has been growing. Sales on the Arizona have been growing like 24% a year. Like it just
year over year.
And growing year over year. But Birkenstock is a really old company. Like it was founded in 1774.
Well, that's pretty old.
By Johann Adam Birkenstock in Germany. And the original idea was to create shoes that gave support and contour to the foot. And in 1896, the Fußbett, which is footbed, was designed. And, by 1925, Birkenstocks are being sold all over Europe. And in 1966 is when they were brought to America.
Uh-huh.
And like literally the first documented mention of Birkenstock was basically March 25th, 1774 as a vassal and shoemaker in some local church archives is where it was first mentioned. Right. Like, I mean, holy crap. Like we're talking generation after generation after generation of master shoemakers or part-time shoemakers, all called Birkenstock. Like this is a business that's gone from Birkenstock to Birkenstock to Birkenstock to Birkenstock.
Wow.
Like it's been really quite incredible.
That is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so basically where they really had their big breakthrough was following World War I, because shoes were now starting to be mass produced. It started to become cheap. But here's the crazy thing is the early mass produced shoes, there were no arch support. And in a lot of cases, there was not even a left or right.
Yeah.
And so this is when they created this whole idea of a footbed being able to be put in the shoe to create like better comfort and whatnot. And following World War I, we also had a lot of people who were returning from the war injured.
Yeah.
And this was a therapeutic insole that could be put into the shoes. And because of that, they had a lot of success in orthopedic circles with insoles and these being considered healthy. And really, the real interesting inventor was Conrad Birkenstock, who really leaned into doing this. And in fact, they were one of the first creators of like being able to do this with plastics.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm completely unaware of all this because all I think of is the sandal that's basically the compressed cork.
Yeah.
With the little outline for the big toe and I guess some other contour.
Well, they had even developed like cork insole, and then in 1902, the first fully plastic flexible insole. They had developed that in 1902.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then they started making shoes on this last with this insole that they would call health footwear. Like they were really ahead of the game in terms of making these flexible insoles and in some shoes with this type of footbed in it. And in 1925, Conrad registered Fußbett, in other words, footbed, as a trademark.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And by 1920, they were supplying them in Austria, France, like all over Europe. And one of the things that they did that's really interesting is then they started to make them appear different, to make them stand out. They started making them in blue,
Okay.
which went on to be copied by Dr. Scholl.
Huh.
Like if you take a look at a lot of the footbeds you buy, they're
Yeah,
blue.
yeah.
That was knocking off
Oh,
Birkenstock.
wow. You don't think
Yeah,
about things like
yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah, so it's 1945. It's now Carl Birkenstock, the son of Carl Birkenstock, but Carl with a C rather than Carl and a K, is continuing to pursue this idea of healthy footwear. And he wanted to make an ideal shoe that was suitable for mass production. And he started to do this. And one of the things that they realized was they were having all of this success in the orthopedic area. And they decided to create what they called the original Birkenstock footbed sandal.
Mm-hmm.
So in 63 is kind of when they came out with the sandal.
And that's the one that I think of when I think of Birkenstock. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were still pretty small because in 1970, they were still only like 57 employees, like in 1970. So really, this is where things really take off. They create this 1-week course called the System Birkenstock. And they invite people, they reach out essentially. So they were having all of this success in the orthopedic area, but there were people in the space that didn't like them.
No.
So here's what they did. They created this 1-week course and they invited all the people who didn't like them to take the course.
Huh. Okay.
And they managed to convince 5,000 professionals over a period of time that weren't using them and didn't like them to do the course. So they purposely reached out to their detractors.
That's cool.
And said, hey, let's try to convert you. And when they managed to get into the US was Margot Fraser, who is a German-American dressmaker who lives in Santa Cruz, was traveling back to Germany to visit a spa in Bavaria because she was having all these foot problems.
Okay.
It was primarily ideas that were being created by tight shoes. And she was pointed out the Birkenstocks to her.
Okay.
And she tried them on. This changed her life. Now, it also turned out she's in California in 66 during the hippie movement. She starts bringing these shoes.
Well, there it is.
There it is. She starts bringing these shoes from Germany to California because of her enthusiasm for how comfortable they are. But you know what? There were still a lot of barriers because people are like, this is an ugly shoe.
Yeah.
Because Birkenstocks, personally, I find them an ugly shoe.
They are. They're, yeah. I can't argue with that.
Yeah, like a lot of shoe stores rejected these sandals because of the appearance. But you know what? The people who wear them love them.
Yeah.
And they've grown and they've grown and they've grown and they've grown. And today, you know, they're a $7 billion empire built on this idea of a more comfortable shoe.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, that's a lot of sandals. That's a lot of shoes.
It's a lot of shoes. And when you sit there and think about the history or where they went back, and I also, like you, didn't realize that they started with footbeds.
Yeah, or that they started so long ago.
Yes.
That's pretty amazing. So what do you think is going to happen now that they're a publicly traded company?
Stay tuned. We're going to wrap up this story and tell you how to apply this lesson to your business right after this.
Hey, Rick, I'm glad we got out again.
Yeah.
What's going on?
My digital advertising's got more expensive, and it doesn't seem to be working as well.
I see.
Nice drive, by the way.
So?
I don't know how I'm going to keep growing. I feel like I'm going sideways, flattening out.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you speak to Steven?
You mean this podcast host?
Yep.
Not yet.
Do you like going sideways?
No. I want to be growing.
Well?
Starter session.
Yep.
5 iron?
Sure. Oh, and you can book your free starter session on this podcast website.
Your turn, Dave.
Let's pick up our story where we left off, and trust me, you haven't missed a thing.
So what do you think is going to happen now that they're a publicly traded company?
You know, that's always a challenge. Because one of the things I didn't look into is what's the structure of the company. In other words, how much of the voting rights do the Birkenstock family have? I didn't.
Sure.
I should have looked at that. That would be interesting because sometimes when these family businesses go public, the family retains the majority of the voting rights. And so therefore they're still able to continue to really drive the business. In other cases, when the owners sell, they end up in a minority position. And often when they're in a minority position, it's not long until they're pushed out of the business. It's a hard call. And it would be sad because this has been in the family for so long. It would be sad if that occurred, but it's the nature of the business changes when it gets public.
It really
There's
does.
now a board and there's people that you have to respond to. And suddenly there's a whole pile of people around you who care about the stock price. Right? Like it's one thing for you to go, hey, I don't really care about the stock price, but there'll be other people who do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's not always a bad thing. It's often a bad thing. And really what it's going to boil down to is how does the family manage that?
Good point. Good point.
Now, the other reason sometimes for it to go public is there's no one in the family who wants to stay involved.
Carry on. Yeah.
So sometimes the reason why these things go, frankly, a different direction is that while the family's involved and has got a board seat and whatnot, they're not really interested and motivated in staying involved. Like, does Birkenstock have the DNA that the Ford family have?
Right.
Where the Ford family still is very, very, very involved in Ford.
Yeah.
Or is it more like the DNA of the Heinz family where we're really not involved?
Yeah, and we wanted to take the fruits of the success of this company and go live our lives. Yeah.
And only time will tell what is the family DNA at this juncture around that. I would like to think that the DNA is the Birkenstocks are going to continue to remain involved in Birkenstock, but only time will tell.
So, personal question, Stephen. Have you ever worn them? Or do you have a pair?
I do not have a pair. I've tried them on the odd time.
They really are not a I wouldn't call them a cult brand, but they have their core group of people that love them, and
oh yeah, the people who wear them love them and find them unbelievably comfortable. And I sometimes wonder, is it one of those ones where when you first put them on, it doesn't have the comfort until your feet get used to that type of feel. And then once you get used to that type of feel, it might be one of those things that nothing else has the same comfort.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a part of it. And I'm sure there are plenty of people that just can't get past the look of them.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. There's a certain shape, there's a certain outline, and you're seeing a little bit more of that. I know with my particular feet, I like a wide footbed. So there's something about a Birkenstock that I like, but the footbed itself, the bottom of it, is always been the problem for me. And maybe it is just not spending the time to get used to it.
Yeah, and
maybe you and I should have a Birkenstock challenge where we each get a pair and we see who can wear them the longest.
Well, and here's the interesting thing. Birkenstock also in terms of its acceptance, because it's no longer a hippie brand.
Yeah.
Like the other thing is, me growing up, if you wore Birkenstocks, you were a hippie.
Yeah.
And so there's a part of me, quite frankly, self-identification, there's a part of me that has a hard time getting past that. But look, Birkenstock was worn by Barbie in the Barbie movie.
Yeah.
And by the way, that was not a paid product placement. That was
a choice. Yeah.
That was a choice. And Birkenstock since that have actually started appearing in fashion show, like Paris runway fashion shows. So they have broken away from it's just this niche brand.
They're getting past some barriers. Yeah.
They are getting past some barriers and having this wider acceptance in Hollywood and in fashion. But I do have to admit, Dave, because of my age and because of my upbringing, there's a part of me that still identifies them with the
I hear you, and I understand, and I never thought I'd have a ponytail for the same reason. I still can't explain it to myself. It hasn't been my whole life. It's but yeah, there's there you either like them because you like them, or you like them because you like what they've always meant, and either way is fine.
Yes. And it is interesting how certain things in society, the meaning of them will change. It's like Birkenstocks are no longer just for hippies. A tattoo is now socially acceptable. Or again, if you were in certain professions, when I was early in my career, if you had a tattoo, you would never be able to show it, and because you would just not be hired.
Yeah.
Right. Beards have changed. It used to be if you had a beard, you were biker gang and rebellious, where, today it's just, you're just someone who has a beard, right? It is interesting how these things do change their meaning over time. But the Barbie movie was actually a massive breakthrough for them
Birkenstock.
in terms of sales.
Cool.
For Birkenstock.
Oh, I can imagine, right? Because it makes it okay for Barbie fans.
Makes it okay for Barbie fans, and they're fun. But I was really surprised when I was researching this that it was not a product placement. It was
that is interesting.
Yeah, which was pretty cool. Which also goes to show you, sometimes it's these unanticipated, unplanned things that happen that can really blow up a brand.
Well, okay, here's my pledge to Birkenstock. The next time I'm in a store that sells Birkenstocks, I'm going to try them on again. And in my mind, I'm going to say, well, what would it feel like if I wore these for a week or so? I'm not going to order them online. I'm not willing to make that commitment, but I will try them on again.
So you see, the podcast will increase them potentially by sale.
And this isn't like us talking about Birkenstock in this podcast is not product placement either. We're not making our bank from Big Shoe.
All right, man. Good luck with the Birks.
Thanks, man. Good talking to you, Steven.
Peace.
Rock on.
See you, Dave.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Please share us, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and leave us a big, fat, juicy 5-star rating and review at Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to schedule your own 90-minute empire building session, you can do it at empirebuildingprogram.com.